At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you reach out to me through my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Today we have Kevin Lenahan. He's a frequent contributor to Court TV. He's just written a book called Storm of Suspicion: The Karen Reed Murder Trials. And everybody loves this Karen Reed story. And this is my first dipping my toe into the story here with Kevin Lenahan from Court TV. He's got a YouTube channel called Yellow Cottage Tales. So check that out, too. You go to YouTube, and it's all his different work on there. Mr. Kevin Lenahan, are you there?
Hey, Ed. Thanks for having me.
No, man, thank you so much. I was telling you off there about for helping me out so quickly getting back to me to book the show. Before we get started on the book, Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed Murder Trials, tell us about yourself. Who's Kevin Lenahan?
Sure. In another life, I was a bar owner and a bartender before that, and I majored in history in college. Never really had any interest in true crime. I don't have any law enforcement experience. I'm not a former lawyer. So it would seem that I don't have any of the qualifications that you would normally have to be considered an expert. And what I do have is honesty, and I dig into these cases logically. And I got dragged, I guess, somewhat unwittingly into this whole Karen Reed experience. So now you're getting dragged into it too, Ed.
Yeah. Well, you ran a bar and you got some kind of northeastern New England accent. I guess you're qualified, right?
Yeah,
teach us a little everything.
I live about 45 minutes from where these events take place.
Oh, cool. Hey, and I was looking up a little bit off there. Are you the guy that just survived cancer, that you're battling cancer?
Yes, I was diagnosed in 2017 with stage 4 cancer, and with the wonders of modern drugs, I'm still able to be here. So hopefully be here for another 6.5 years.
Dude, God bless you, man. I just had a similar experience. It's an enlarged heart and a damaged liver. And I just pretty much 3 weeks ago found out I'm not going to die.
Oh, good.
So you know the feeling, bro, right?
Yeah.
Man.
I get scanned every 3 months.
Yeah.
And I live in 3-month installments.
Yeah.
But it's actually a great way to live. Really, I mean, you don't wait to do things; you do it. You know.
I hear you. My only problem was I didn't have the energy or the breath to do it. Like even that, we're getting too much off the topic, but even that little intro that I just did now, I'd be out of breath by then. Yeah. And so when it got to the part of tell us about yourself, I'd hope the guest would just talk for a good 5 minutes to catch my breath. But let's get to it.
Oh, I can do that if you need.
No, you're good so far, bro. Thank you so much. But Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed Murder Trial. How'd you get started on this? What caught your interest?
Sure. So interestingly, on January 29th, 2022, a blizzard was coming into New England, a historic blizzard. And this is the night that Karen Reed allegedly struck John O'Keefe, leaving him to die, and he died several hours later. While that was going on, I had just launched my YouTube channel, Yellow Cottage Tales, and I had my first case of COVID, and the type of cancer I have is lung cancer, so it's a little bit dangerous for me. Normally, I take care of the snow removal and stuff like that. I couldn't do any of this because of this. I had 104 temperature, and I couldn't sleep that night, and because of the fever. And so I went looking for a documentary on HBO, and the one I found, I just typed in documentary. One of the ones that came up was called "Have You Seen Andy?" And it was about the Andy Puglisi story, who disappeared in Lawrence, Mass, when he was a 10-year-old boy. I lived in Lawrence at that time and was myself 10. I didn't know Andy, but I remember this happening. It was a huge thing to happen in the city, and it was a case. So I watched that, and that's what inspired me to start not only covering true crime, but looking at it in a different way, as though maybe there's a role for citizens covering these things, having an interest in them, discussing them, that, especially cases that have gone dormant, the cold cases and stuff like that. So that was how I got into it. I was not aware that John had died. I'm not from that area. And it was April 18th, 2023, so over a year later, when I started getting text messages from friends in law enforcement on that morning saying, you got to go check up this story. This is the story of the ages. This is the true crime case of our time. And I go to this blogger that's put out this story about the conspiracy to frame Karen Read. Now, I knew right away what I was reading was a defense theory. I knew nothing about the blogger. I had heard of him. I knew nothing, but you could tell by looking at that's what it was. But nonetheless, there were a lot of intriguing things in it. And also, I start out from a point of ignorance. Like, I don't know anything about forensic data, autopsies, evidence storage, homicide investigations, nothing. And it's all been a journey for me, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And included in that initial article was a report that one of the witnesses inside the house, so just to backtrack a little bit, Karen and John, her boyfriend is a Boston cop, and they're drinking downtown at a bar with friends. Some of these people they know very well, some of these people not so well, but they know them all. And when the bar is closing, these friends invite them to an after-hours get-together at 34 Fairview Road in Canton, which is about 5 minutes from downtown. So Karen's had, they count in the trial 9 drinks, so she's had roughly 9 drinks. So she's pretty legally intoxicated, but she's a regular drinker, so she can kind of handle herself. She drives John to the house and drops him off there. She decides not to go in. She goes home. She leaves a bunch of angry messages. Later on, she wakes up in a panic and calls some friends. They drive looking for John, and they find him buried in the snow at that house near the road. So at some point later on, they developed the theory that John was actually killed inside the house. And so one of the people inside the house was a woman named Jen McCabe. Jen McCabe was the sister-in-law of the owner of the house, who is also a Boston cop. And this is the kind of elements of why people are intrigued and think there might be a conspiracy here. Sure. So Jen McCabe voluntarily turned in her phone when the police asked for it a few days later. And eventually, the defense team, using their own somewhat shady forensic... Sorry, that was the phone. Using their own forensic data analyst, he found, using his version of Cellebrite, which is the main extraction tool used by police all around the world, he found that Jen McCabe had Google searched from her phone at her home at exactly 2:27 how long to die in the cold.
Okay. And
so this number, 2:27, and that alleged search is kind of the linchpin for this whole conspiracy theory. Because there's no way that she would have been making that search. It would just be too much of a coincidence, because her friend, John O'Keefe, was a friend of hers, was doing that right at that moment, getting buried in the snow and dying.
Okay, what's the lapse in time from the time that Karen Read drives away to the time that this Jen McCabe makes this Google search?
Yeah, good. So she drops John off sometime around 12:30. And she's home at John's house. So she's his girlfriend. She doesn't technically live at the house, but she stays there a lot of nights during the week. So when I say home, it's really John's home that I'm referring to. Okay. He lives about 4 or 5, 6 minutes away. And he's raising his nephew and his niece. The niece is 14, the nephew's 10. The nephew is at a sleepover that night, but the niece, the 14-year-old niece, is home. He's raising them because they're orphaned. Their parents died for medical reasons, tragically, 8 years before. John had no kids of his own. Karen had no kids of her own. So John had been raising them for 8 years. And so this is a truly heroic guy that stepped up. Yeah. That was, he was a bachelor and stepped up to raise these people. And so Karen gets home. She punches in her phone connects to the Wi-Fi at around 12:36. So, and eventually, the taillight pieces from her Lexus were found in a debris field near where John's body was found near the street. So the physical evidence indisputably matches Karen's Lexus to the crime. So this is an either or kind of case.
Gotcha.
Either Karen did it, or that evidence was planted. And to the defense, to try to argue that she is completely innocent, the only way is to make the jury believe that evidence all could have been manufactured. And so a lot of that begins with 227.
Well, wait, let me ask you. 227 is when that search was made.
Yeah.
Okay, but let me ask you a question. She's drunk, buying drinks, right? She's driving. He can't even drive, right? She's doing the driving. Maybe she was so drunk she just ran him over and went home and had no idea.
Maybe, but there's a lot of other evidence involved. So, for one thing, the vehicle data shows, now she didn't hit him in drive, she hit him in reverse. And the vehicle data shows that she slammed the gas in reverse at over 70% throttle for over 5 seconds. And the Lexus reached a speed of 24 miles an hour, which it maintained for several seconds, and she went at least 60 or 70 feet. So that's a pretty reckless act. It's a modern Lexus that has all kinds of sensors, so there would have been alarms sounding. Presumably, I don't know if you can prove at this point that's not proved. So
they even have that backup? My car has. It's 2019. I got a 2019 Jeep Cherokee, and I can't back up and hit something. It'll stop itself. The Lexus didn't have that.
I don't know, and that question's been asked. Did it have one of those automatic braking systems? Yeah. I know there's an override button on that too. So I'm not sure on yours if there is, but I think there is. So you can So there's no argument, there's no evidence at this point for that. Okay. If that was the case, that would definitely prove intent, right? If she hit the override button. But to be clear, there's no evidence of that at this point. We don't know if the sensors picked up, John. And the state's theory is not that the vehicle hit him directly, that it clipped his arm and sent him. He probably put his arm up in a defensive way at the last second. The elbow, again, allegedly, broke the corner of the taillight piece off. There's a dent in the panel, on the rear panel, that is exactly a forearm's length away from the taillight. So probably his arm snapped back into it. He had a cocktail glass in his hand that he had taken from the restaurant. And there are pieces of cocktail glass found on the bumper. The remnants of the cocktail glass are found near his body. He's thrown about 15 feet away at an angle onto the lawn. The defense claims, all right, so just let's start with the strangeness of John's injuries. If he's been hit by a vehicle, he has an unusual lack of injuries. He has no significant injuries from the neck down, with the exception of a series of parallel tracks that are described by the medical examiner as shallow abrasions by a blunt object on his arm. The defense claims these are dog wounds. These are from a dog attack, combination of nails and teeth. And inside the house was a German Shepherd. So that's an important part of the evidence here. John struck his head. So he has a 3-centimeter horizontal gash on the back of his head. The combination of so bones were crushed in the head. So a combination of this head wound and hypothermia were the cause of death. But there were no other injuries from the neck down other than the arm and a shallow contusion on the right knee.
And these dog bites.
How could a vehicle strike somebody and not leave more significant damage? That's one of the main questions that probably a lot of us, I know I did spend a time trying to understand.
Yeah, and you, like you said, as a Boston bartender, you would have a lot of experience in these areas. But now let me ask you this: they just left at a social occasion with a bunch of mutual friends. Had they been fighting or arguing when they left on the way home? They were happy?
Not at all. So the defense has really struggled here to try to manufacture a little bit of a possible motive here. So one of the people that went to the after-hours party and was also at the restaurant, which was called the Waterfall, is an ATF agent named Brian Higgins. And he is named by the defense as he is one person, one of three, named as a third-party culprit. So an alternative theory as to who could have done it. Now, it turns out that Brian Higgins had a series of textual flirts, a flirtatious relationship based mostly in text messages between him and Karen Reed.
Right.
This had only started a few weeks before. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the ATF guy was flirting with Karen.
Yes, so she began it. She reached out to him and said, you're hot. And he's like, where'd you get my number? But they continued this flirtatious relationship for a couple of weeks. and then it had stopped maybe a week before they ran into each other in this situation at the waterfall. So the defense is going to say he had a motive to kill John. Now, he was friends with John, not close friends, but friends. There's no history at all of any negative interaction between Brian and John. There's no negative interaction between any of these people and John. So it's really difficult to try to manufacture a motive, and some of the attempts are a little bit strange. You know, one of the homeowner's brother lives near downtown, but he used to live next to John, and they were friendly. They were friends, actually. And in fact, just a few weeks before that, when John took a trip to Aruba, he asked this Chris Albert and his wife to watch his house for him. But the defense is trying to argue that there was bad blood there. And based on the fact that the younger Albert had once ran across his lawn and John yelled at him. And then John felt bad about it, so the next day he came over and brought the kid candy. So that's it. They tried to seize on that to say there was bad blood. But it was actually Chris Albert that had invited John out to drinks with them that night. So the defense tries to suggest that they were trying to lure him. That's the word they use, into a trap. But it also makes no sense. In this trap with their wives, their kids, you know, if you know the old mafia movies, they're going to do a hit. Why would you do it in your own house with your wife and kids there? But that's part of the defense theory.
Okay, but it would also seem to me, Kevin Lenahan, a premeditated murder. You're going to back up into a guy? That's your plan on how to kill a guy? You're going to back? That seems like a crime of passion, no?
Well, I don't think it's in any way established that Karen did this with any intent. She is impulsive. She has a history, and she demonstrates this in court, actually, strangely. She's impulsive and has a history of anger management. Nonetheless, there's no proof that she deliberately tried to hit John or even knew he was there, really. Yeah. I personally think that what had happened was, so when they were a mile away, they had never been to this house before. And so John called Jen McCabe, we mentioned later with the 227 search, called Jen for directions. And so Jen gave him the address, and he opened up his Waze to get directions, and the Waze guided them there. So they didn't know the way there, but they came down this road called Cedar Crest. And what I think maybe happened, is that Karen, after she dropped John off, they were probably fighting, and she wanted to go home. She started to go forward, but realized she didn't know how to get home from that way. So she wanted to go back to Cedar Crest so she could just retrace their path home the way that she knew. And so she just did it in a particular angry way, in a reckless way. Yeah. But that's not to say it's not impossible that she wasn't trying to send John a message too. So we just don't know.
What about the way he exited the car to wind up behind the car to get into the house? Is there a logical reason for that?
Okay, so, we're trying to piece things together. John is dead, so we can't know. There's no video. There's no witness. All we have is Karen. So the car pulls up for maybe 10 seconds in front of the driveway, and then it pulls to the far edge of the property, about 80 feet away. And at that location, if you were to cut across the lawn, it would be another 72 feet to get to the front door. Okay, so they park there, and they probably argue in the car for a while. But John's phone, the GPS, shows that they reached that position fairly soon, and it never left that position. So the GPS has a margin of error for 15 feet. So when John did finally get out of the car, he never got further than that 15-foot radius. Now, eventually that phone will be found by the first responders in the morning underneath John's body. So it was underneath his body all night. It never moved. So it stopped moving. In fact, we know the last time that phone moved was 12 minutes and 32 and 16 seconds. So not 12 minutes, 12:32 and 16 seconds. So 32 minutes after midnight and 16 seconds.
Okay. How did they discover the body the next day?
Okay, so Karen drove home and tried to call John many, many times, just kept hitting send on the way home. Finally, when she got home, within about a minute of getting home, she left the first in a series of voicemails there were 5 voicemails left in those early minutes, say a half hour after she got home. They were all very angry. The first one is, John, I effing hate you. And every one of the voices were angry, but none of those voice messages suggest in any way that she knows she's been in an accident or he's hurt. that he might be hurt. Okay, they're just angry, and she's jealous that he might be cheating on her. Then the phone activity goes silent until about 4.
I'm unclear, because I thought that the possibility was she was cheating on him with the ATF guy. What's the suspicion that he's cheating?
There's no indication at all that John has ever cheated on her.
Or that she would have a suspicion that he was cheating. She didn't mention cheating on the phone, right?
Well, she's a jealous girl. So they introduced evidence in the first trial. So a month prior to this, they went on a trip to Aruba, and they'd all been drinking. And Karen got off the elevator and saw John giving a hug to this woman, the sister of a woman who is a best friend of his, right. A woman who was married to his partner. And Karen went into a drunken rage. And this rage lasted a couple of days. The kids were on the trip with him. They were witnesses to it. So the state's theory is that this kind of jealousy was beginning at this point, and John was souring of the relationship, so was kind of halfway through the process of breaking up with her. She seemed to suspect that or sense it, and so this may have been why she reached out to Higgins. But no, there's no evidence that John ever cheated on her or anybody. And at one point, she even said she didn't truly suspect that he did.
Okay, but we know damn well she was mad about something, and she was the last person to pretty much seem alive, and we know that.
Yeah.
Now we know he's found in the snow the next morning. How was he found?
Okay, so at 4:30, she wakes up. She calls John.
4:30 in the afternoon.
4:30 in the morning.
4:30 a.m.
4:30 a.m. So
she wakes up 2 hours later.
Yeah, so she went to sleep around 1:30, so she wakes up at 4:30.
Okay.
She calls John. Now, by the way, she also had called, strangely, her parents at their home at 1:18 or 1:13, I forget the exact time, but she called their parents 3 times in those early morning hours, and they didn't wake up.
Okay, are there any other occasions? Because you can get these phone records, they go back for years. Any other occasions where she would call her parents up at 1 o'clock in the morning? Do we know that?
We don't, and you think like a police officer,
sir.
But
digital forensics I did big cases. That's my big thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We've tried to find out, and I think Karen's parents have been put on the witness list by the prosecution this time, so maybe they'll show up with phone records that show that that's the case. But at this point, there's nothing in evidence to show that. So, yeah, maybe Karen every couple of weeks gets drunk and does that.
Yeah, I think if the defense had that, they would have showed it already, in my opinion. How is the body discovered, though?
So, all right. So, just back to, I'm sorry to get there a little bit long way.
No, you're great. You're great.
She wakes up. She calls John, doesn't answer the phone. Now, something has changed. She's in kind of a panic now. She thinks for the first time she's figured out that something's happened to John. So the niece wakes up inside the house because Karen's in a hysterical moment. She's screaming. Karen calls. She ends up calling Jen McCabe on her niece's phone and says some things like she claims at the moment that the last time she was with John was at the waterfall, which was not true. Okay. And Jen knew that and corrected her. So then, after having this conversation with Jen, she calls up a person named Kerry Roberts. Now, Kerry Roberts is a close friend of the O'Keefe family. She had dated John in high school or something like that, went to a dance with him, and had remained close to the whole family. In fact, later that morning, it's Kerry that picks up the parents in the blizzard and brings them to the hospital to view their son's body. She's not connected to the conspirators. She's connected to the O'Keefe family. So there's no way she could be part of any hypothetical conspiracy here. And so Karen calls her at 5 and says, John's dead, Kerry, and hangs up the phone. And Kerry's just waking up with her husband, like, what is that? And Karen calls back and says, something's happened to John. I think maybe he's been hit by a plow. Very strange thing to think, right? Yeah. And this was confirmed because when Kerry hung up, she called the local police and she called the hospital to check and see if anybody had been turned up injured like that. So that confirms that Karen did say that to her. So Karen gets in her car to go out looking for John. Now, this is 5:08, and you can see the Ring video of this because Ring video picks her backing up into the snow, and she just nudges John's Traverse. And this comes into play later as the defense suggests that that's when her taillight was damaged. All right, so she goes out looking for John. She's seen on video surveillance near downtown. So she does seem to be trying to retrace her steps, perhaps. She may be confused.
So wait. That's right. But she didn't go straight back to where she would have known the body was. She was looking in other places.
She seems to be, unless she was just trying to retrace her way back there because she didn't know how to get there. We're not sure. Yeah. Now, the state contends that she did go back to 34 Fairview, but they didn't offer exacting proof. What they offered was by looking at the cell tower data, they could see that she was heading in that direction. Okay. But they couldn't prove at that point that she got exactly to that point. She seems to have driven around for about 20, 25 minutes. Now she goes to the McCabe house. You remember Jen McCabe, 227 Search.
Yes.
And when she arrives there, she's hysterical still. She wakes up the neighborhood, wakes up the family. She shows Jen that her taillight is broken. And moments later, Kerry Roberts arrives to join the search. So Karen wants to go to 34 Fairview. But Kerry says, let's go back to John's house. Kerry doesn't believe the story. Karen, she's like, you're drunk, you're hysterical. John's probably sleeping on the couch inside the house somewhere. Mm-hmm. So Jen McCabe drives Karen's Lexus, and Kerry drives her own vehicle, and they go back to John's house. And inside there, they search. They don't find John. Now they all pile into Kerry's SUV to go looking for John, and the first stop is going to be 34 Fairview. So now I'm finally answering your question, Ed. So now it's just after 6, and we can capture the feeling of this moment in trial because the dash cam video of the first cop on the scene is played at length in trial. So you get a sense of to what degree the streets are plowed, how windy it is, how snowy it is. It's still an hour before sunrise, so it's pitch dark. This is a dark area where they're searching. As they're going up Fairview Road, Karen she's sitting in the back seat, but she's kind of perched where her head is in between, and she's acting hysterical, and she's asking questions like, could I have hit him, and stuff like that. She looks out the window, and she says, he's there. There he is. Stop the car. And Kerry slows down, but doesn't even quite stop because she's confused. She doesn't see John. Karen jumps out of the car. Oh, before she jumps out, she had been in the process. Another one of the many strange things in this case. She had been in the process of sending a call to John. And then when she spots him, she throws the phone down on the seat, but leaves it on. So eventually that call goes through to John's voicemail, and that voicemail picks up much of the next 5 minutes what happens, including the 911 call from Jen McCabe. So Karen jumps out of the car. Because the car is still slightly moving, she falls, jumps back to her feet, runs into the yard to where John is basically a mound of snow. Kerry testified that looking out the window, she was still confused because all she saw was a mound of snow until finally Karen started brushing snow off, and Kerry's like, oh, my God, it's him, there's someone there. So the three women, Jen stays there for a moment to call 911, and then the three of them eventually begin doing CPR and trying to do what they can to wake up, to revive John. He's not breathing. He's cold. He's got some blood inside his mouth. He also had a laceration on his tongue, so that's probably what that's from. At no time did the people inside the house hear any of this and wake up or come out. So that's a major issue for many people that believe in Karen's innocence.
But that was around 5 a.m.?
That was around just after 6 a.m.
6 a.m. Okay, we're talking to Kevin Lenahan. And the book we're talking about is Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed Murder Trials. And Ken, you used to own a bar. Do you still own a bar now? Because I need a drink, bro.
No.
This is some story, man.
I can still make a good drink if you put the stuff in front of me, but it's been a few years. No, it's a game for young people.
But Kevin, here's what I'm thinking so far. Here we got a bunch. Half of them are cops. The other half are dating cops. They're all cops. You know what I mean? They're drinking with glass. A glass in a car. They're driving drunk with a glass and a drink in their hand. You know. Mm-hmm. What happens that turns this into, hey, this is a premeditated murder, and not, hey, this is a stupid accident. Let's go home.
Well, see, I don't think it was a premeditated murder, and I'm not sure anybody does on the part of Karen. No, okay. I don't. At the very worst case scenario is she was angry, raging, and knew he was there and backed up to try to scare him. And I'm not even sure, like I said, I believe that. I believe she may not have known he was there and was backing up in a rage to just go home.
Or even hit him on purpose in a rage, and by the time she got home, didn't remember. You know what I mean? These people are wasted. 9 drinks, come on.
Right. But she did seem to figure it out when she woke up at 4:30. Yeah. And one thing she said she never did was call 911. And John was still technically alive at that point. So there's a level of intent right there.
And
so
what was she charged with? First degree premeditated murder?
She's charged with second-degree murder,
Okay.
OUI manslaughter, and leaving the scene of the accident. And this is a bone of contention, too. Some of the jurors came out after the trial to say that they were actually unanimous on that she was not guilty on charges 1, leaving the scene of the accident, and charge 3, second-degree murder. So right now, Karen, based on that, has tried to appeal. She took her appeal to the state Supreme Court and lost, but it is now, and she took it to a federal judge and lost, but it is now in the hands of the federal circuit court. So we'll see what they say.
Okay, those charges don't seem unreasonable to me under these circumstances. Probably happens 1,000 times a day across the country, right? So now, what is the big conspiracy theory, bro? What's the theory of this, what's going on?
Well, so there are a lot of things that either are odd or in many cases really have been explained or given very reasonable explanations. But when the explanation is put out by the defense, it's made to seem odd. And this, again, goes back to, this is the theme of the book, about how ignorant many of us are, most of us are, even many cops who might, if this doesn't involve their particular line of work. So one of the things the defense always makes a big deal about, and they made a big deal in a recent documentary on HBO, is the idea that the evidence, so for instance, John's clothing was picked up at the hospital that morning. Yeah. And it doesn't show up in the state police evidence log until 6 weeks later. Where was the clothing? Did the troopers keep it in their truck? What kind of mysterious things were they doing? Were they taking it to the laundromat? Were they planting taillight pieces on it, which that was part of the evidence? Well, it turns out no. It has a very simple, mundane, and logical explanation. The state police run these investigations in Massachusetts, and unless it's in a large city like Boston, but they run them out of the local DA's office. So they're assigned to a county. And so these detectives were assigned to this county. The county is where the case is prosecuted from. So the evidence room is not at a state police barracks or facility. It's at the DA's office, right? So that evidence, John's clothing, was taken that day, like all the other evidence, and put in the evidence room at the DA's office.
Okay, but was it put into a sealed evidence bag with a piece of tape on it, somebody's initials on it, that whole deal?
100%. And that was demonstrated at trial. Okay. But 6 weeks later, that evidence understandably goes to a specialized lab to be studied, and which is run by the state police. So that's why 6 weeks later it ends up inside the state police system, their computer system. And it's a very mundane explanation, but yet most people in the public don't know it. I wouldn't have known it if I hadn't researched it. And it's just another part of this case is the defense constantly bringing up things that look nefarious that aren't.
Well, a criminal defense investigator 45 years, that's what you do.
Yeah,
you come up with it. You look at every little thing, you come up.
Yeah. But it's our job in the public to understand that that's what defense teams do, and to try to get the real explanation. And that's where that's the part that everybody seems to skip.
The other part, too, is especially with all these documentaries and stuff, some of them just drive me crazy, man. I think it was Making a Murder with that the guy Dace there. And they're playing this music, and you don't need the music, and then they got the guy's going to sit in his office. There was no justice today in court. Making this, what are you doing? That's not real criminal defense. Why not just do the real stuff? It's interesting,
So I was actually in the documentary that just came out on this that was made by the Unsolved Mysteries people. It was their company that made it. Okay. And it's showing now on HBO Max and on Discovery ID. And so they were given rare, unique access to Karen. They filmed over 400 hours with Karen Read. They were in the war room with them all throughout the trial. They were through jury deliberations and all that stuff. So they had incredible access to film her. But they also, Terry, the owner of Unsolved Mysteries, is a responsible person, and she didn't want to put out something one-sided. She's not someone that was here to try to investigate the case, but at the same time, she wanted to provide some balance. So she reached out to some people like me and other people who have tried to study it from different sides. And she did the best she could to try to make a balanced presentation, not to try to investigate the case, but to capture the feeling in the moment of being in the court and being part of this and the mob outside. I mean, there are huge crowds that are outside for this trial. It's like something you'd never seen, Ed.
Hey, they didn't let you wear that trench coat that Robert Stack used to wear, did they?
And I would like that, man.
I know, right? I'd love to do that too, man.
They filmed me twice, but they barely used me, because my thing is to weigh evidence, and that's boring.
Yeah, you got to ham it up for those guys, that's for sure. Otherwise, they don't want to use it. Okay, but there's so many conspiracy theories. Like, what would be the motive for the cops to go? We want to get Karen Reed, and she's going down. What would the motive be to go after this woman and frame her?
Well, so the motive would be to go after John, and there's really like I said, there's no real motive established for that. And then they're somehow clever enough to try to tag this on Karen. Right now, when they invited John and Karen to the after hours party, they had no way of knowing that Karen wasn't going to come into the house. So the idea, just on the surface, this is why it bothers me that 75% of the public believes in this conspiracy, where if you just take that 1,000-foot view, a flyover view, it's very strange. It's a very unlikely and absurd. So their theory is that they lured John to the house for reasons unknown, got in a fight with him, and maybe he got hurt in a way that they didn't maybe they didn't plan to kill him. They just planned to rough him up.
Sure.
Now, there's no signs on John's body that he was in a fight. That's what the medical examiner said, and there wasn't. But that once he was seriously hurt, they decided they didn't want to get caught with that. So rather than take him to the hospital and try to have him saved, their plan was to bring him out alive, mind you, to leave him out on their own lawn near the street but not on the street, and so he could die and never tell his story. It's a very, very bizarre theory, right?
It's also a risky way to hope someone's going to die, just by an exposure, Well, what about these dog bites?
What if he gets rescued, right? What if he gets rescued and tells his story? Like, it doesn't seem like a very good plan.
But what's the story? What's the theory behind these dog bites, though? The dog's in the house. He had to be in the house, right?
Yeah, so if they were dog bites, or to the extent that they can convince a jury that they might be dog bites, then that could be reasonable doubt, because it would show that John did in fact go inside the house. Now, GPS shows that he did not go in the house.
Right.
The defense will present data. They took off the health app.
From
John.
Yeah, it's called like steps. And that's good for like 3 feet. That'll tell you every step you're taking, around the house.
Well, So the data that they had, so his health app reports that he went up, let me put it the way I put it, ascending/descending 3 flights of stairs and walked a distance of about 116 steps. But at the time when his health app thought he was doing that, both GPS and Waze and other evidence shows that they were not in the house. They were in the car. They were still about a mile away on their way there. And so somehow the health app erroneously reported that.
There's conflicting data from the phone.
There's conflicting data, and people would say, well, why would you believe the GPS over the health app? But the reason is GPS is extremely accurate location data. It's designed to fly a missile up a camel's through his window from 1,000 miles away, right? So whereas the health app is trying to, using a variety of sensory data to interpret what you're doing. It's always going to be by its nature a little bit imperfect. And another thing that people that
wait a minute, what about Wi-Fi? Did it pick up Wi-Fi inside the house?
There's no known. His phone didn't come close enough to connect to the Wi-Fi. Again, he was found about 72 feet from the front door. So there's no. Whether there's any geofence data that was ever gathered, we don't know. Another strange part of this case is that the feds, the U.S. Attorney's Office, were convinced by Karen Reed. Karen Reed and her lawyers walked into their office in August of 2022 and convinced them there was something going on here. And the feds launched an investigation, including a federal grand jury, getting the FBI. So we don't know what evidence they may have got. They're required to turn over any exculpatory evidence for the defendant, and they have. But there's reasons to think that the federal investigation was a little bit fishy, too, at some point, or a lot fishy. But that's a whole other story. But back to the conflicting data, I guess one of the things that I want people to pay attention to is that the defense never challenged during that first trial the accuracy of that GPS location data. They tried to challenge the accuracy of the clock and say that the clock was off, so that in order to try to create the possibility that he did go up and down stairs. But lost in that was they never disputed the location data. And the location data showed So with your GPS data, you got a normal margin. If you're getting regular signal, the margin of error is going to be about 15 feet. But if the signal weakens, that margin of error expands, and that circle can become much larger. But every second that data is coming in, you know the signal strength. So the margin of error is always known. And there was only, while John's phone, we know where it went, and it ended up resting at the edge of the property near the street. And there was a 4-second period, and only a 4-second period, where the signal became weak enough that the margin of error expanded enough to conclude the house. So unless John ran into the house at the speed of Usain Bolt, rang the doorbell, and ran back for some reason to the exact same spot and ended up in that spot of the lawn on top of his phone, there's no way that it happened. And there's definitely no chance that John ever went into the house, did anything at all. Even if he was Usain Bolt, it was only 4 seconds. He definitely didn't go in, get attacked by a dog, and get beat up. And the defense never challenged this, and that gets lost.
Yeah, but here's the thing with that, though. Okay, I'll devil's advocate. The prosecutor has their own defense digital forensic investigator, and the defense has their own digital forensic investigator. And sometimes the lawyers are not asking the correct questions, and it's very, very frustrating. So we may see in the second trial that more fleshed out, okay, is what I'm hoping. Because sometimes I'm watching these things on TV and I can't, like, what was that guy, the kid, he was a multi-level marketing kid, and he was killed. Jody Arias, right? Kills that guy? Okay. The DFI is trying to explain to them, hey, listen, he's in his ex-girlfriend's. He's reading her emails and going to her YouTube, going back to her emails, and it just got lost. It got lost, no one was paying attention. And then it turned out that guy, Jose Martinez, deleted a whole bunch of stuff. The stuff in that case was outrageous. But I don't want to get too off topic. But now, what about this Jen McCabe, this 227 search? What is her explanation for doing that search? She must have taken a stand, right?
She didn't do the search. So we can eliminate the possibility that she did that search both on technical grounds and on logical grounds. So first of all, the state brought in 2 independent, extremely high-level experts. One of them was actually the senior forensic data manager for Celebrite, and that's the program that was used to find that. And so what they determined was that Jen McCabe made those searches at 6:23. Now, the defense doesn't dispute part of that. In the defense version of the story, Jen McCabe made those searches at 2:27 and then again at 6:23. All right. Jen McCabe testified that it was at 6:23, as they were working on John on the ambulance, that they sat in the car to warm up, and Karen asked Jen, please look up how long it takes someone to die in a cold or something to that effect. So that's why she made that search. And the technical explanation is that Jen McCabe, when she got home from the after-hours party, she kisses her. They got 4 daughters. She kisses her kids goodnight, and one of the daughters is trying out for an 8th grade basketball team. So Jen is communicating with the basketball coach and also opening up a tab on her browser to search about that league. Now, it's that tab that gets left open, and then at 6:23, when she opens her phone again to make a search again, she uses that very same tab. And so the Celebrite program, the version that Rich Green used, made the mistake of attaching that timestamp of 2:27, when in reality at 2:27 she was just opening up a tab to search for the basketball league. That's the technical explanation. But even if, and I'm not a tech person, so if we don't like tech stuff, there's other explanations. There's other ways to refute this. I'm going to give you 2. One, about 20 minutes after John was taken away, Karen Reed herself was put on an ambulance. She was Section 12 because she had said something on her father on a phone that sounded suicidal. Right. On the ambulance, she said asked the paramedic the same exact question that she had asked Jen McCabe: how long could someone last in the cold? So that confirms, in a lot of ways, Jen McCabe's story. But the other aspect of it is just logic. Like, does it really make sense that the killers already know that the plan is to put John out alive? They don't know he's going to. They somehow know that he's not going to die in the house, and the plan is to put him out alive. And they send the McCabes home, telling them that's the plan. And these people go home to their daughters, knowing that. And by the way, she has a health watch on, and her heart rate is completely normal through all of that. There's nothing unusual going on while she's at home. I mean, if that was a real thing, even if you were a psychopath, you'd be terrified. Like, oh my God, both me and my husband, we're never going to get away with this murder because John was beat up in a house and attacked by a dog. So there's no way you're going to hide that for the medical examiner, and you're definitely not going to hide it by leaving them on your own lawn. So if that was the plan, they'd be going home thinking we're never going to get away with this, and our kids are going to grow up without parents. And so the logical thing to do would be to go to the police, even if you're, just completely for selfish reasons, But Jen McCabe was a friend of John O'Keefe's too. So it just doesn't make logical sense that she's casually searching, communicating with the basketball coach, looking up the league. And, how long is it going to take for this murder conspiracy that I'm now a part of, because I would make them part of that conspiracy. How long is it going to take for this poor guy that's a friend of ours to die outside? It's an absurd thing to believe in.
Well, how big is this police department? What's the population first of the town, and what is how big is the police department?
I think the population of the town is about 22,000 people. Okay. The median income is like, say, 700,000. It's very close to Boston. Like I said, John O'Keefe was a Boston cop. Brian Albert, the homeowner, was a Boston cop. And I don't know how many people actually work for the police department, but one thing you might be interested in, Ed. Yeah. So Brian Albert's brother, I've already mentioned one of his brothers, Chris, who was not at the after-hours party. Well, another brother is Kevin Albert, who is a detective on the Canton Police Department. He was not out drinking with them that night.
Okay. But the cops they were Boston cops, but they live in this small town with 22,000 people.
Exactly, and where their brother works for the Canton Police.
Was the big shot detective?
He's a detective, yeah.
Okay, and how big was that? It was called Camden. It was called
Canton, C-A-N-T. Yeah.
How big is that police force?
I think. I don't know how big the police force is.
And who's the one?
I could give you an idea though. One thing we learned during the trial is that they do not employ a police dispatcher. One of the officers on duty always mans the desk.
Yeah. Okay. The smaller the town like that, all these cops know each other. They're all out drinking together. They may not be that afraid. Their heart rate's going up. They're afraid of a cover up. They may be doing stuff all the time.
Yeah, but Jen McCabe would be afraid, and her husband's not. She's not a cop. Her husband's not a cop. She's not a criminal. Okay. Her husband's not a criminal. They're just regular people. There's no criminal history. She used to be an elementary school teacher. I mean, yeah, exactly.
She's the one. Okay. Oh man, what a story, man! And you seem to come out of nowhere, man. What makes Kevin Lenahan going on court TV? How did you become such an expert on this?
Sure, that is an interesting story in this case. So when I got those texts that morning on April 18th about this story, I was like, all right, conspiracies are always popular, and this looks like there might be something to it. So I said, maybe I'll start doing a series on the channel. Now, at the time, I had never done any live shows on my channel. I just scripted videos, recorded them, edited them, video edited them, and put them out there. And so I started doing a series on this called Framed with a question mark, because even though a lot of this stuff, if 227 was real, and at that time I had no reason to think that data wasn't just data, then it seemed to me something happened, right? But the conspiracy also didn't make sense to me. The idea of leaving someone out on the lawn by live to die on your own lawn. There was a lot of things that didn't make sense. So I started covering the case early, and over the course of the summer, I picked up a team of people that I liked. I picked up 2 co-hosts. I picked up a team of people that were supporting me in Discord and stuff like that. I liked them all. It felt good to have the channel going somewhere. I started doing my first live shows. I was popular, and my channel was popular with the Free Karen Reed crowd. And everybody on my team was Free Karen Reed. But I kept asking questions. And I also didn't like what I was seeing. This blogger that Karen was using called Turtle Boy was incredibly harassing the witnesses. I mean, showing up where they work, showing up at their homes, leading a mob of over 120 people on a rolling rally to their homes with bullhorns. I mean, going to their kids' soccer games or lacrosse games. I mean, it was just, the more I watched in that, what I was looking at was a hysteria. I felt like this was the Salem witch trials all over again. And I felt like I should speak up, but I was slow to. I regret that. Because everybody on my everybody followed my channel, and everybody on my team was Free Karen Reed. But over the summer, I couldn't stop asking questions, and eventually, the other side, the Free Karen Reed side, started getting suspicious of me. And it kind of led to a culminating moment at the end of the summer where Turtle Boy, who no longer trusted me because I was asking too many questions, Turtle Boy was the blogger that they were using, brought a mob into my chat during a live show and started attacking me for, get this, both sidesism, as though that's a crime. And he claims to be a journalist. I'm like, both sides, isn't that where we all should be, right?
Well, with a
both
name like
sides.
Turtle Boy, we have to respect his journalist credentials. And I got to tell you, I don't make, Kevin. I'm 63 years old, man. And I use my real name from the day I was born. Nothing pisses me off than this anonymous crap on YouTube. These characters popping up out of nowhere, man. I am disgusted. Now, nothing for Turtle Boy himself. I don't know this guy, but just this whole new. That we're even discussing this kind of stuff, man. And people on Twitter, DC Drano with these giant followers. This is crazy, man. We got to get back to reality and responsibility for what we say. I just want to remind the audience, though, that this podcast you're talking about was Yellow Cottage Tales that they can find on YouTube. So they can go back to the start and see your whole transformation. And the book we're talking about is Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed murder trials. So you started, what was it called? Both sidisms? Okay.
Yeah, both sidism was what I was accused of. So I lost it at that moment. And it was kind of, look, everybody was upset. I probably woke up the neighbors. My partners left me. My team left me. Most of my audience left me. I lost 45% of my subscribers in an hour. But it felt good to me because I finally did what I knew I had to do. I had stood up to this clown and expressed what he was doing was wrong, and that we needed to start asking deeper questions about this case. So when I started doing that, even though I lost almost my own whole audience, it went down to like 20 people, right? But I kept asking those questions, and because of that, and I made mistakes.
Yeah, sure.
I made mistakes, but I always corrected mistakes and tried to do the right thing. And I think people on the other side now started to trust me because they could tell that I was honest and was handling things credibly. And so over time, I started developing a lot of sources on this case, including with some of the witnesses, including some of the key witnesses. And so when we got to just before the start of the first trial, Court TV reached out to me to go, and I became part of a regular panel to discuss the case on that channel.
I tell you, another phenomenon, one of these big cases, right? And you have a theory. Okay, look, it's a theory, and it's a kind of, and there's a little bit of evidence to support the theory. But then there comes a point where that theory has been debunked. But people are so married to the theory. Now they want to find brand new. Let's keep searching for new evidence that's going to prove that theory, even though the first evidence that we thought proved that theory has now been proven wrong.
And it's all confirmation bias, right, Ed? It's just, you're forcing it into it,
It is so frustrating. And it's because so much of these, I get upset, but so many of these true crimers are just so passionate about their beliefs. You got to be dispassionate about this stuff and go where the evidence takes you.
Right. I agree, man. I agree. And we're seeing this also even with like the Delphi murders where Richard Allen has been convicted, but there's this huge, large segment of the public that believes he's been falsely convicted.
Well, in the back of my mind with that, there does seem to be some occult stuff going on there. That did come out in court documents, and it's been my experience when there is that kind of occult stuff that then cover-ups do, and that's why I'm asking about how big this police department is and stuff like that, because there are cover-ups, man. There's cover-ups galore.
Yes, absolutely. That's people think like, and sometimes Vinny has said on TV, like, so for instance, I've talked about this. There are a lot of signs of improper communication between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the U.S. Attorney himself and Karen Reed's team. There's a lot of evidence for this. And so Vinny will say, well, did you believe in I thought you didn't believe in conspiracies. And I said, no, of course but conspiracies are not the norm, but they do happen. So, yeah, of course I believe that some conspiracies are real.
Rudy Giuliani made his career on RICO, which is conspiracy convictions, okay? So I have clients in prison right now convicted by Rudy Giuliani, okay, 40 years later, of conspiracy, So we definitely know that. But one thing, too, I just want for the audience, because we were talking about these documentaries and the music and stuff like that. Did you watch Tiger King? Joe Exotic?
I watched the first few episodes of that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, did you know that Joe Exotic did not cooperate whatsoever with the first season of that? That they took home videos. His ex-husband sold videos of him, and they made it look like he was cooperating. And nobody knows. I've interviewed Joe a couple of times, and now he's got my phone number. He drives me crazy. We talk all the time. I can't get rid of him, even though I gave him the same speech I gave you at the beginning. Okay. But I can't blame him. He's all alone in there. But you watch these documentaries on TV with this music and the way they present things, it's really not the way real life is. Now, we've at 55 minutes, okay, I might have to cut a couple commercials out, but we've been talking to Kevin Lenahan. Got to send you a bill, Kevin. Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed murder trials. What do you want to leave us with in a couple of minutes, bro?
I want to leave us with the idea that it is important. I think it's valuable for people in the public to dig into these cases. But it's important to have self-awareness, know that about yourself. Are you someone that really, really just can't resist having this fit into your pet theory or your pet conspiracy theory about how the world works or something like that? And I'm not saying you shouldn't have ideas like that, but know yourself and make sure you're not trying to force a theory into it, whether it's this case or any case. And also have a sense of skepticism that it's the job of any defense team to try to make anything look weird, because anything that looks weird is reasonable doubt, right? So just have a little skepticism about that and try to dig in for the truth. Try to hear both sides. Don't be in an echo chamber. Just, because I am not talking down to anybody, because I made all of these mistakes at one time. So just have a little self-awareness and seek the truth.
And I would just say to the audience, if you want me to interview somebody who is convinced, I'm fine with that too. I'll interview anybody on this topic. Once I get into it, and I like this, I'm interested. I like Kevin Lenahan. I'll interview anybody else. Just be nice and polite about it. Recommend people, but don't come on top of me saying, "Oh, Ed, you don't know what you're doing. You kiss this guy's ass." Yeah, look. I'm sure I'll treat every guest the same way. Okay, so everybody's welcome. All are welcome at the Opperman Report. Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed murder trials, former bartender Kevin Lenahan. Thank you so much, my friend. I really enjoyed this. And once again, thank you for being so flexible with me on the scheduling set.
Thank you, Ed.
Good night, sir.
All right, good night.